Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to this session. My name is Dominique Hyde. I am the Director of External Relations at UNHCR, and I am very excited to be in this room, although I feel it's very cold, but I hope you're warmly dressed. So just a few logistics before I actually start. This is actually being watched both here as well as remotely. So for those of you in the room who'd like to listen in French or in Spanish, you have headsets available on your chair. But I have been asked, because this is happening, that people for some reason forget to leave the headsets when they leave rooms. So please leave the headsets. Don't bring it home. It won't go through security. Thank you very much. So I actually fought to do this because I'm so excited about this pledge. It is absolutely such an effort that has gone on in over 50 countries, 33 UN organizations coming together, and it's very, very exciting. So I hope that you know that you are attending the high-level event on the UN Common Pledge on Refugee Inclusion. And if you were not meant to be here, please stay. This pledge is based on something very simple, but also a very powerful idea. And it actually stems from our own Secretary General, who had the idea at the last GRF. And it's as simple as this. It's including refugees in national systems. So as you know, as you heard this morning in plenary, many refugees spend decades in limbo. They wait for the conflict to end. They wait to be able to return home. And what happens in most cases is that they access temporary services like health clinics provided by humanitarian organizations, informal schoolrooms with volunteer teachers, and these become, in some ways, just de facto services for these families. And children, if they go to school at all, leave without certificates. And young people find work where they can and how they can in informal sectors. And as so many of you know, university and going to university and having careers are in many ways just a pipe dream. So everything changes, and I think this is what this is about. Everything changes when refugees can access national systems. Children go to local schools, they learn the local language or the language of the country, they make friends in the local community, and they graduate with qualifications that help them move ahead, whether in that country or in when they go home. And young people have the right paperwork, and they can access decent work and contribute also to the economy and of the host country, of the country that's been hosting them. And when they go home, they can rebuild their countries. And I think that's a lot of what this pledge is about. So I don't think I need to explain to you why it makes sense to include refugees in national systems, why in so many refugee host countries have inclusive policies more and more. And many have made pledges on refugee inclusion in 2019, and we're hoping to see the same amount of interest in inclusion at this Global Refugee Forum. But it's not always easy. Many host countries are under-resourced and overstretched, and it takes time, it takes investment, and there are challenges. You heard it from His Highness the King of Jordan, you heard it from the Colombian Vice President this morning, you heard it also from the Vice President of Uganda. So today, the pledge is the UN's commitment to providing host governments with the support they need to strengthen national systems to benefit refugees, but also to benefit host communities. Under this pledge, as I said, no fewer than 33 UN entities are promising to provide technical and programmatic expertise to help host governments include refugees in their plans, budgets, service delivery systems, and job markets. So today you'll be hearing from a variety of different stakeholders in this pledge, those who have helped us co-create the pledge and who will very much engage in the coming 4 years to make these pledges not just pledges, but actually realities for the refugees and realities also for the host communities. If you would like to add or create a question or actually vote for a question in the pigeonhole, there's I don't know if you've all been received a piece of paper, or you should have all received a piece of paper when you came into the room. It has a QR code because we're all very modern and are expecting all of you to have mobile phones. You can just scan your QR code and that will be added to questions in the pigeonhole. So either you can vote for one and that will get more points in the questions that are being asked, or you can create your own new question as the panels proceed. So before I move to our 2 mini panels, we'll hear opening remarks from 3 people. And the first is Helena Fraser, who is the Director of Policy and Program for the UN Resident Coordinators System at the United Nations Development Coordination Office. Helena, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dominique, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. And it's my great privilege today to speak on behalf of the 3 UN entities that are co-leading this common pledge: the UN Development Coordination Office, my home office, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, and of course, UNHCR, which is our host today. Ladies and gentlemen, as we accelerate towards 2030, which is just over the horizon, the urgent need to focus on those most at risk of being left behind is clearer and clearer. Among these, populations on the move, including refugees, stateless persons, returnees, and mixed populations on the move, is absolutely key. Many of you know that the 2024 Global Humanitarian Overview was launched earlier this week. And this describes that more people are displaced now than at any other time since the beginning of the century. And as always, women and girls are bearing a disproportionate burden, suffering gender-based violence on a huge and persistent scale, presenting enormous challenges to our efforts to achieve gender equality by 2030. Today's UN Common Pledge on refugee inclusion will leverage the capacities and expertise of 50 UN country teams, and we hope that that number will continue to grow. In each of these countries, under the leadership of the UN Resident Coordinator, we will see a whole of UN effort to support host countries to include some of the most marginalized women, men, girls, boys, and youth in the world today. And of course, these country teams are not alone in this endeavor. At the global level, complementary commitments from across the UN system, across all pillars, will ensure that our country teams on the ground have the enhanced support that they require. Now, the specific and measurable commitments of each of these UN entities are listed in the summary of the pledge, and I'm going to do another public service announcement like Dominique. Please take a look at this lovely QR code and click on it, and you'll be able to see there the detailed commitments from across the UN system. And together they represent a real significant step change in the contribution across the family of the UN in the final push to leave no one behind. Now, accelerating the SDGs really requires us to leverage development capacities in the spirit of the Global Compact on Refugees itself. We need to shift from parallel humanitarian service delivery, which of course is very expensive, towards investing in national systems and extending them to include refugees. I want to also recognize that the UN is only a smaller player in this. We have to acknowledge the enormous generosity of host countries, host communities, and also the incredible resilience of those who have been forced to leave their home, whether because of war, climate change, poverty, or other reasons. In the UN, ours is a supporting role. And with this pledge today, we are making ourselves accountable to delivering on that role as one in the best way we can to improve the life of millions of people on the move. So we're very, very proud. It's been a lot of work, and I want to pay credit to all of the team who've been working on this for over a year to come together and deliver on this UN Common Pledge today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Helena, for that. And now I would like to invite our next guest, Ms. Patricia Dancy, who is the Director General of the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation. Switzerland is not just a co-host for the Global Refugee Forum, but we're thankful for that, but has also been an incredible support and ally to the UN family as we co-created this pledge. Ms. Dancy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dominique. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, thank you very much for having me here on stage. Of course, we support the pledge. And I think if you're displaced, if you're a refugee, it's usually a generation that you have to face this situation. So it's long. So we have all interest to renew the pledge. We have to update our apps, make it 2.0, a 2.1 version of it, make it better, make it more inclusive, and also breaking some of the silos that we're still in. We have heard this morning, it's important that UN agencies, governments, civil societies, and the private sector join efforts. But most importantly, we have to put the refugees in the center of our efforts. It's not because you lose the home that you lose your mind or that you lose your energy. You're still a human being with a lot of capabilities, and it's important to have refugees on the table, on the discussions, always in the center. What is also important for this dignity to actually realize is that we include local actors. We all know that if you're integrated in a community, in a village, you have to be integrated locally. You have to play in the sports club, you have to be a volunteer, you have to speak the language. Not only the language, but the language of the community that you're actually integrating. And you then eventually can also join the workforce. We have here in this room one of my former colleagues, Rohala Esmati. He's seconded to UNHCR. We met for the first time. He's standing at the end of the room in Kabul, Afghanistan. He has then moved to Switzerland, has worked for us a couple of months, is now seconded to the UNHCR, brings a lot of experience with him and his family for the different integration efforts. It's a joint effort that we have done, and please talk to Rohala during the break. He should stand here, not me, but that's another story. Now that I'm standing here, I'm taking the floor a bit longer to also tell you that the burden is on us. The burden is on us, the states and the partners. We have limited resources. There will not be more. So we have to do more, better with less. And for this, the UN family has to extend hands to IFIs. We had this morning representatives of the World Bank, to other families like the Red Cross and Red Crescent family, to make sure that we have this integration go even further. Another aspect is the host communities. Some countries do that very well. Kenya, Colombia, Uganda, Jordan, we had examples this morning. Switzerland can learn a lot from you all. What we can never take for granted is that host communities over time extend their houses, their arms, and their purse to the host communities. This is a constant work, not only with host communities, but also with parliaments, the ones that create this conducive environment for the integration to take place. So there we also need to make better and bigger efforts. And then lastly, the burden is on all of us individually as members of the state, as members of an organization, as members of the UN and partners. When we talk about integration, what did we do to integrate refugees? For next Christmas, who is on our Christmas table? Who will be invited into our New Year's party if we have one? We have to ask ourselves this question. Myself and my family will make sure that we have refugees around when we celebrate and when we mark important events, because we believe integration is also a personal commitment, not only a commitment of states and the UN organizations. Thank you.
Merci, Patricia. I don't think we were expecting a personal commitment, but I think that's another pledge that we can add to the list. Thank you so much for your remarks. And I'd like to now invite our next guest for your remarks. So I'd like to invite Faith Cooper to the podium. Faith is a regional director for the International Rescue Committee, as well as a member of the U.S. Refugee Advisory Board. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Dominique. Good afternoon, bon après-midi, and warm welcome to all of you. Members of government, United Nations country team, refugee-led organizations, and distinguished guests. It is a distinct honor and profound privilege to offer opening remarks this afternoon to begin the UN Common Pledge 2.0 session. I am here today as a representative of the United States Refugee Advisory Board. Launched last year as a state-level mechanism by Refugee Congress, Refugee Council USA, and Georgetown University's Institute for the Study of International Migration. The U.S. Refugee Advisory Board is dedicated to empowering forcibly displaced populations, ensuring that their lived expertise informs humanitarian solutions. I feel strongly that the moment calls for a reimagination of our global humanitarian system. As a former refugee myself from Liberia, who fled the brutal civil war in my home country, witnessed some of the worst human atrocities that no human should ever have to experience. We bounced around multiple refugee camps before resettling in the United States. With this experience, I know firsthand that the design of today's system is an imperfect solution to the growing need to protect the over 100 million forcibly displaced across the globe. We heard Commissioner Filippo Grandi this morning talk about 114 million and continuing to grow. So we have a responsibility of being the voice of 114 million. As I stand here today, the call to begin this reimagination cannot come soon enough, especially for all those who face the rhythm of a history like I did personally. I am not alone. Also, in my professional career as regional director for the U.S. Southern Border with our Resettlement, Asylum, and Integration Unit at the International Rescue Committee, I see the need for systems change on a daily basis. With that said, On this 5th anniversary of the affirmation of the Global Compact on Refugees, we commend the 50 UN country teams who are committed to stepping up their support to host governments under this UN Common Pledge 2.0 and committing to doing so with meaningful refugee engagement. That is the must. We also commend the host governments where these UN country teams are working, and we call for a progressive approach that will help refugees to access national systems rather than being stuck in parallel and separate systems in limbo, as Dominique mentioned, for years in some cases, and I know that all too well. We also call on more UN country teams to step up in efforts to strengthen the global refugee system. It requires a collective approach with refugees at the center in a meaningful way. The Global Compact on Refugee multi-stakeholder approach highlights the need for diverse actors, including refugees, to meet its objectives. This is indeed an opportunity to define specific commitments towards localizing refugee response. The link between resources and decision-making is critical, but localizing decision-making is not limited to just increasing funding to refugee-led organizations. We must do more. Our aim is to amplify the participation and leadership of refugees in decision-making at all response levels. This means building a refugee system that puts refugee at the center in a meaningful way. We will not be the exception. We must be the priority, and by that, I mean equitable inclusion. Because if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? We urge all UN country teams to not only commit to the UN Common Pledge 2.0, but to join us in this reimagination, to hold systems accountable, to actively participate in its effective implementation, and to deliver in the next 4 years with forcibly displaced people at the forefront of the journey. So in closing, I want to say action, action, action is what we call for. Thank you for this opportunity to join you for this session.
Thank you so much, Faith. You heard a very powerful voice there, very clear messages. We're now going to move to our panel. And so I'd like to invite our panelists for panel 1 to please come up on stage. I hope you know who you are, Sean, Andres, Maria Jose, and Rez. And I'd like to introduce, and I have a great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Ms. Femi Oke, an international journalist and moderator. Over to you, Femi.
Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated, panel 1. I do not know if anybody mentioned it to you, but there is a QR code. I'm sure I'm the first to bring this up, but please do use it, because otherwise our mini panel will become a minuscule panel, because half of the panel is dedicated to your thoughtful, insightful comments and questions. So I'm hoping to see a flurry of phones all looking at this QR code here. And you know that there were 2 conversations we're about to have this afternoon. One is about the importance of inclusion of refugees in national policies, and the other one is about the role of the UN with hosting countries. Those are our 2 questions. You can actually see the questions. They're just hanging out there, waiting for your enticing comments and questions, while I say hello and good afternoon to our panel. Good afternoon, panel. How are you?
You're all right.
Very good. Excellent. All right, let me introduce you to our panel. Again, you can see who the panel lineup happens to be on this piece of paper, so you can also follow along with me. Let me say hello to Mr. Sean Fleming, Minister of State for International Development and Diaspora, Government of Ireland. Minister, in 30 seconds, what connects you with refugees?
I'm the Minister in the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ireland, and of course I deal with people who are coming to Ireland to seek international protection, and more recently a lot of people seeking temporary protection from the Ukraine. And I'm an elected politician in my own constituency, and I have a few centres in my own constituency for accommodation for people seeking international protection, and I meet many of the applicants on an individual basis. So I know at global level the issues, but I know personally at first hand the stories of the people seeking asylum in Ireland.
Thank you, Minister. You can stay. Mr. Andres Ramirez is head of COMA, the government of Mexico. Mr. Ramirez, what connects you to refugees in 30 seconds, please?
In 30 seconds, only 33 years of my life, 28 years with UNHCR, being a former UNHCR staff, and I've been the head of the National Refugee Commission in Mexico over the past 5 years.
Ms. Maria Jose Torres Macho, UN Resident Coordinator for Chile. Welcome. So good to have your voice in this conversation. You know what I'm going to ask, but we do not know the answer. In 30 seconds, please.
My first job in the United Nations was actually to be part of the first refugee return from Mexico, Chiapas to Guatemala, where I was based. And 30 years later, I'm still here in the World Refugee Forum speaking about exactly what I did in the beginning. And that was the time that we met with Andres. So it's a nice coming back together.
And Ms. Rez Gadi, Executive Director of Our Seat. I have to tell you what actually, Ms. Rez Gadi, will you tell us what the acronym stands for? Because it's one of my favorite acronyms, which I don't often say when I'm in a UN space, but I love this acronym.
That's a huge compliment. Thank you. Firstly, ena mana, ena reo, ena whenua o te ao no reira, tēnā koutou katoa. I greet you in the te reo language, te reo Māori, the language of the tangata whenua, Indigenous people of New Zealand, where I was fortunate to be resettled and find a home free from persecution. My connection to refugees, I was born stateless and as a refugee in a refugee camp and spent the first decade of my life as a refugee, and then I was fortunately resettled and able to find a new home in New Zealand. My connection again to refugees was based on my personal lived experience and then using the difficulties and the challenges that we faced personally in our lives to contribute to making the system better for other fellow refugees. So working with and for refugee communities to ensure that refugees have a seat at the table, and that is what Our Seat stands for, refugees seeking equal access at the table. And we're working with incredible refugee communities trying to initiate a strong movement of refugee leaders that can influence the policies and programs that can contribute to a stronger global refugee system. Does that answer your question?
It perfectly answers the question. Thank you. We gave our speakers an assignment, and their assignment was, what is the importance of refugee inclusion? We didn't give them long, not even a third of a TED talk to come up with what that perspective was. But it starts our conversation, starts you thinking, starts getting a provocative line of thought from you to then have that conversation back with our speakers. So we start with Minister Fleming.
I think you all know Ireland at this stage is a relatively prosperous country. But what most of you will not know is over a century ago, we had a massive famine in Ireland. And the population of Ireland over a short period of time between death and emigration resulted in the population going from 8 million to 4 million. So that devastated the country. We've now population of 5 million. We're prosperous, but it's deep in the DNA of everybody in Ireland to assist people who are fleeing famine and have to emigrate to start a new job or a new life for themselves. So it's in the DNA of the Irish people because of our deep history. Now we do have a lot of people coming to Ireland to seek international protection, be it temporary or on a permanent basis. And first of all, we have a good policy. Every single child who comes to Ireland gets into the local school. We don't have to build schools. They're integrated into the local classes. Every single child, be it primary or at second level school. Then we also move on, they get medical cover. Nurses or doctors visit the various accommodation centres as required and have free access to the Medicare system in Ireland. Then we would say in terms of employment, people who are seeking international protection after a very short period before they go through the full status recognition system can take up employment and help increase their own standard of living. And especially recently we have 100,000 people who've come from Ukraine to Ireland. Over 20,000 of those are already in schools. Over 20,000 of them are working. Many of them are women and children, some males. So our priority is to integrate them into the education and into the workforce and to become part of Irish society. And we do find a lot of people who come eventually stay. Some want to go home, but many of them actually stay in the country permanently. And we are the richer and the better country for that level of diversity.
Miss Maria Jose Torres Macho, you were writing something down. Did Minister Fleming inspire you, or were you thinking about what you were going to say?
Absolutely. I think it has to do what I was going to say in terms of why it's important to have national systems, including refugees, because when we are investing in parallel systems, first, are not sustainable. Second, it requires a lot of resources, and normally you are appealing to an international support from the international community. And then third, you are not considering this is a problem that is going to stay rather than an investment. Therefore, having the education system, the health system, receiving them as part of an inclusion policy is always a win-win rather than a problem. I would invite governments to really look into that. It's the experience in Chile, and that's one of the contributions that they would like to have. So absolutely a good approach.
Ms. Gadi, what do you think of what you've heard so far?
I think there are very strong reasons already outlined, and as Ms. Dominique had mentioned, it's quite simple, including refugees, and we also believe that refugee situations continue to increase in scope and scale and complexity, with an average wait time of more than 20 years for resettlement. The imperative to include refugees in national systems is now more urgent than ever. This prolonged displacement underscores the critical need for host countries to take proactive measures in refugee integration to address the challenges faced, such as generational gaps in education, limited access to livelihoods, and heightened vulnerability to exploitation. It is crucial that states improve and provide refugees with opportunities for education, for employment, and social inclusion, which unlocks their latent potential to enrich the societies they find themselves in. With new challenges facing global refugee responses, refugees have indicated that we are committed to contributing in meaningful ways through our collective knowledge, through our expertise, and the perspectives to advance collaborative, innovative approaches together. There are profound advantages that arise when refugees are included in national systems and that refugees are empowered to contribute meaningfully to society and the economy. So incorporating refugee participation into these efforts is fundamental. We are not passive recipients, but active agents of change. We are determined to contribute to the nations where we have sought safety and the system as a whole. When refugees actively participate in decision-making processes, they contribute invaluable insights, leading to more effective and more legitimate tailored solutions. Refugee participation is not the end goal. It is a means to achieving the ultimate goal, and that is to have a better global refugee response system for all of us and our host communities. If we delve into the data, we do find compelling evidence that when refugees are integrated into national systems, the benefits are not only confined to those individuals, but integrated into the national systems and extend to tangible impact on the broader society. Studies consistently show that refugees, when given the opportunity, contribute significantly to the economic fabric of their host nations. Refugees often become vital contributors to industries. They become entrepreneurs and dynamic members of the workforce. And by leveraging their skills, their talents, and diverse perspectives, refugees inject vitality into our economies, fostering innovation and growth. Neglecting refugee inclusion and participation not only perpetuates human suffering, it exacts significant financial and humanitarian costs and squanders an opportunity for host nations to harness our talents, skills, and resilience that all displaced individuals can bring with them. So inclusion into national systems isn't solely a matter of the present, it's an investment into a more promising future. By offering education, healthcare, and employment, together we can empower refugees to make positive contributions to our communities, enriching the social tapestry and fostering a more inclusive and tolerant society. By harnessing the transformative power of inclusion and amplifying the voices of refugees, we can pave the way for policies and initiatives that foster stronger, more resilient communities. This panel is not just about acknowledging the advantages of refugee inclusion. We also see it as a call to action. So let us work together to build societies where the talents of refugees are recognized, their potential is maximized, and where the strength of diversity becomes a cornerstone of our collective progress.
Mr. Ramirez, you're looking thoughtful. Share your thoughts with us.
Well, first of all, I think that was very important what was stressed by the Minister of Ireland by saying we are better when we consider and include refugees in national systems. So instead of thinking of ourselves as if we are very nice and very good with refugees, it is something that actually improves our situation in all respects. So I think that's very, very important what's been mentioned here. And I would agree with whatever thoughts were put forward in this panel. I think that there are many important reasons to include refugees in national systems. But first of all, it is certainly the best way to ensure that the most urgent and priority needs are not overlooked. We do not know what is the refugees suffering. We do not understand if we are not being emphatic with them. And we have to put in the shoes of the refugees so that we understand their situation. So we have to include them because that's the only way in which we can only understand their priority needs. Then for this to be effective, it is key to follow an inclusive approach that duly addresses the concerns of the different ethnic and national refugee groups within such. Ideally, the whole range of the most important groups are taken into account. It's not only refugees as a group. We have to consider that namely there are children, girls, boys and adolescents, youth, women, elderly, working age women and men, pregnant women, persons with special needs, and this category has to be addressed, has to be taken into account. We cannot simply say refugees in general. The inclusion of refugees in national system can only be sustainable insofar as it is the result of well-established public policies at the federal, state, and municipal levels, for which the strategy to accomplish this refugee inclusion must consider, since the outset, a clear roadmap towards building the aforesaid public policies. The roadmap will have to bear in mind the identification of stakeholders that play an essential role in the development of the strategy and its ultimate goal. Simultaneously, a refugee participatory mechanism should be put in place. for which there is not a sole recipe, as it will depend on the particularities of each asylum country and of the circumstances surrounding a particular caseload. For instance, the refugee participatory mechanism in Mexico is designed and planned as a four-partite mechanism with the participation of UNHCR, the Refugee Commission, the civil society members, and refugee representatives of the main 4 countries of origin who sought asylum in our country. Thank you.
So I love this question that's getting a lot of votes. Well, 5 votes. Okay, so that's a lot here. If it makes so much sense, panelists, to include refugees in national systems, why doesn't this happen systematically? Please.
Well, I think there are reasons that I speak of the context right now. I think the figure that was provided at the beginning in many of the opening remarks about 100 million of people on the move, it's scary, and it does present a lot of challenges to the countries that are receiving them. So I really first point to acknowledge the complexity, and second, I think one of the tendencies that we are seeing right now, and it is really complex because I'm speaking now about Latin America and particularly the situation in Chile, but also in the region, is this connection between refugees and security threats, which is bringing the conversation about refugees and people on the move to the area of security rather to the area of social inclusion, which is what the panel is about. And I think we need to emphasize more than less what we are discussing here today, that actually refugees or people on the move do not necessarily pose a security threat, but by not addressing the complexity of the entire problem, we might actually work only on security and fail to do what we have successfully done in many years. And I think third, because we tend also to look at refugees currently as a problem that is of the central state, and we are losing something that my colleagues have emphasized, and I have seen in action for so many years of working on that, the value of working with host communities. We are losing that, unfortunately, in the policymaking because we are extremely busy in dealing with the issue of borders, dealing with the issues of security. So I think the SDG agenda, and particularly how beautifully the whole SDG 16, speaking about refugees, is connected to decent work, SDG 8, or to climate action, SDG 13. I think we have examples that have been presented that can really give us hope. But I think we need to be, I hope this refugee forum really brings the stronger voices on the value of inclusion than to the value of looking at refugees and people on the move as an issue and a threat.
Minister Fleming, you described what sounded like a systematic approach to refugees and including refugees. Why isn't this approach used elsewhere around the world? And I don't want us to be too nice. Like, just be honest. Because we're all in a safe space.
Yeah,
if we pretend that we...
I give you my understanding.
Okay, go ahead.
One lesson that we have learned in Ireland, and it's the issue of prejudice of the local community. And I want to put that word out there. And we had, the situation was when you came to Ireland a number of years ago seeking protection, you could not legally work in the country and draw a salary and register. And it created, and it's very much so now with the increase in some right-wing activists, people who are coming to the country for social welfare reasons and not working and contributing. So we've changed the rules in Ireland where when you're here a short period of time, very short period of time, you can legitimately work even if you're not fully processed. And that has helped enormously. Lucky we're in a strong economy and we have full employment, and we need more people from outside of Ireland to actually come here. And I think if the people integrate through employment and the children are fully integrated through education, it takes out the prejudice. And the biggest issue we have is a rise in prejudice against people coming into the country. And it's recent in Ireland, but this is the best way of dealing with it. Employment and education, because to meet people who are into work, to meet them at the school gate, and I think it demystifies who are you and where you're from, and a possible fear people have. Another thing we have done in all our local and municipal elections, As soon as you arrive in Ireland, you can have a vote in our local and municipal. Once you're residing in the state, maybe even only for a month, you get a vote in your municipal election. In my hometown a number of years ago, we had a person who was waiting for their status to be cleared in Portlaoise, and he's elected mayor of my local town. So it's very important that they don't vote in the national elections or constitutional issues, but to do vote locally. And now it's incumbent on all the political parties in Ireland to make sure we have diversity of our candidates going forward, because it's seen as a plus from our point of view. It's a benefit to us that people have diversity on their tickets, not all like myself, male in the room. And I'm going to make one remark here now. When I arrived here today, I was struck by the predominance of males at the whole conference. I would have expected coming here across the board to see 50-50, and certainly what I've seen in the main hall outside was 80-20 in favour of males. And the suits, and I'm talking about the male suits, some of us have to make way. And I would hope the next time there's a conference like this, there'll be an emphasis to put on gender balance here, as well as talking about gender balance, and take that as a criticism, but I'm saying it in a constructive way. I would be happier to have 50% females in the room, and I do make that statement. Okay, thank you.
Minister, who's going to come instead of you next time then?
I would say hopefully somebody from Nigeria or Ukraine.
You're
And a
playing to the
female,
moderator
and a
now.
female.
Okay. Sarah from RC USA. Sarah, where are you in the room? All right, this is Sarah's question. Sarah's question is for Ms. Gardy. Res gave the first part of her introduction in Maori. How can refugee inclusion welcome or be in better relationship with Indigenous populations in host countries? And why is this important?
Thank you very much. That's a really important question. And I think part of the minister's points talking about some of the prejudice that's created within the communities is also relevant here. As refugees and as Indigenous communities, I think, unfortunately, as vulnerable, marginalized communities, we're often pitted against each other, and we're not creating the spaces to be working more meaningfully together and recognizing that there are many objectives and goals that are mutually beneficial to both our communities, and that working together to achieve those actually would go a lot further, and working in solidarity would help us achieve more progress for our communities. I think currently, it is something that's on the agenda in my country where I'm from, in New Zealand. There is a conversation around how do we work more meaningfully with tangata whenua, Māori Indigenous community as refugee communities, as they are the rightful owners of the lands that we are welcomed and given refuge on. And how do we incorporate stronger partnerships from the time of arrival and then throughout the integration process. And it becomes very important when we think about how refugees are often politicized for different gains in the country context, and when different competing interests are pitted against each other, and there can be some arguments around, well, why are we focusing on refugee communities when some of different communities are also struggling? And so this conversation, I think, is a really difficult one, but an important one. How do we engage more meaningfully? How do we ensure that refugee partnerships with Indigenous communities are not used in the sense that they're politicized against each other, and actually recognize the power of working in solidarity together?
Scotty, you're asking the how question. Do you know the answer, or are you hoping that this forum will have the answer?
I unfortunately don't have the answer on my own. All I do know is that our communities in New Zealand are recognizing these important partnerships, and we're meaningfully engaging and finding ways to work better together. If we had the answer, I think we'd have more Indigenous communities also at this forum, because that's important too, and we're not there yet. So partnerships is where we need to be focusing on with Indigenous communities.
So I'm going to share this question between Mr. Ramirez and Ms. Maria Jose Torres Macho, because the question is about politics. Can you share examples of what has been effective in overcoming political barriers to inclusion. For example, perception of negative opinions from the public, voters, perception of resource limitation, there's no money, the public doesn't like this. Handing over to Mr. Ramirez. You
Thank you.
start.
That's what I like about feminism. First man.
Oh.
She's a feminist, I know. Thank you for your question. Of course, there are lots of perceptions. It's not that in the society, everyone has the same opinion. There's a whole range of opinions that varies a lot. And increasingly, for example, in our country, there are sectors of the society that are not exactly the best friends of the refugees. And particularly when it takes longer, and it's not the same thing when the refugees just arrived and after a month or 2 months or 3 months, they all love the refugees, but once they are there for many years, then they see them as a burden. And then there's a lot of rhetoric, actually politically speaking, against the refugees. So it is very important for us to prevent this to become some sort of a xenophobic approach. Luckily, in our country, we haven't reached the situation whereby the political parties use it as a political campaign against the refugees so as to win elections. We've seen many countries in Europe and even in the US that have used this as a banner. In Mexico, all the political parties do not use that banner. Luckily, so far, they do not use the banner because it hasn't reached the point where they believe that they might win an election by using that banner. That's very important. But what we have to do, the ones that are more related to this situation of the refugees, we have to make sure that this is not going to happen. Because the very moment that happens, it is very dangerous. So we have to do a lot of information campaign, try to build much more sensitivity towards the population and many of the Mexican sectors so as to prevent that there are raising sectors of the society that would believe that it is very important to use this as a political banner. So it is critical, the social communication approach towards showing that actually the refugees are not a burden. Actually, they are a very important element that helps our society to grow and to be better all the time.
Absolutely. No, I think Andres has made a very strong point that I'm going to just complement with a couple of examples from Chile, and exactly in the line of what he was saying. The politicization of the refugee debates is what we have right now. And what we did in Chile, and actually was a beautiful project together with Mexico, both big cities, Mexico and Santiago, was to work in giving opportunities to refugee and migrant population to start moving into the care system. And for that, they received training, they received certification, and you should see the emotion in the faces of these people that for the first time receiving a certificate that allowed them to move on in the labor market. And that was something that was done together with the local authorities, solving an issue that is very important. People in Chile are aging very quickly. We have a very old population, and they need people to care for them, which is a problem that resonates very highly in Europe. This is just one example. Another example that goes into that direction is the need of the private sector to have some employments and employees that are not sourced by their own country. And they cannot achieve that because we are facing that politicization of the debate right now. But we are, I think, providing some space at the local level and exactly doing what Sin was speaking about in the case of Ireland, to find a very practical approach to inviting refugees and people, migrant, to be part of this labor force, and therefore starting a process of regularization that is not allowed right now in the law. My third example that I think is very powerful from Chile. 50 years ago, 1973, Chile suffered a military coup. 70,000 Chileans were benefiting from international solidarity. They became asylum seekers or refugees in many countries. I had the pleasure to be in Chile receiving them back, becoming a tremendous asset for the countries that received them and integrated them, as well as coming back to Chile with a lot. And I think that was such a compelling argument, just to prove that actually what we are doing in the country team to be part of this global refugee compact is the right direction, because they were actually the best testimony, as Faith has made her pledge and Res has made her pledge. There is so much that countries gain by giving them opportunities. So I think that the Chileans are a great example of that as well. Thank you.
Panel one, we've only just got started and now we're at the end. Thank you for your wisdom and your insights. I'm going to invite you to go back to your chairs. And as you do that, this room will erupt in wild applause. So coming to the microphone in the aisle, completely unrehearsed, is going to be somebody who knows about Uganda's system with refugees, or Tanzania's, or the alternative is a success story that we haven't heard yet. Put your hand up if you want to volunteer. Where do I have the volunteer for a success story of refugee inclusion that we haven't heard yet? Where is that? Where's that volunteer? Fantastic. I knew if I waited long enough, there'd be an uncomfortable silence and somebody would volunteer. Thank you, sir. Please, panel two, come and sit down by the name tag that says your name. Please come and sit down, panel two. Join us on stage. Hello, yes, thank you. I really appreciate you. Panel two, sit down. This is the break that allows you to do so
Kia ora koutou,
surreptitiously.
no mai hara mai whakato mai rā ki tēnei hoi hoina ki tuko papa o tēnei rā. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou koutou.
Good afternoon. Could you introduce yourself very briefly? This is 30 seconds.
My name is Mustafa Derbashi and I am originally from Palestine, but I came from New Zealand.
All right, and so your 30-second success story is?
30 seconds. I just moved from a person who wasn't able to speak one word of English to be appointed as a New Zealand member of the highest royal awards in New Zealand, a member of New Zealand Order of Merit.
Okay, that is a wonderful success story. Thank you. All right. Oh, see, now I've got volunteers who all want to come and tell their success stories. This will be a future panel for GRF in the next 4 years. So we just have a panel of success stories that inspire us to keep going and keep doing the work. Panel two, it is so nice to see you. Welcome. Panel two's assignment was to talk about the role of the UN in supporting host countries. It could be complementary, it could be critical, it could be practical. That is what we're going to be looking at. I'm going to say hello and greet all of our panelists. Starting close by me, we have Mr. Abdinasir Hassan. It's so good to have you from the RYENO, another acronym that has a beautiful breakdown. Would you say very briefly what that acronym stands for? Just the acronym of the organization you're representing before you do your assignment, because I know you're eager to do it, but the acronym first of all.
Thank you very much. So our organization stands for Refugee Youth Empowerment Networking Organization. It's a new organization which works or helps the refugee graduates who are residing in the refugee camps. And we are trying to build their skills and giving training to stand by themselves.
Wonderful. I'll come back to you in just a moment. First, I'm going to say hello to Ms. Tabo Gloria Lehaye. It is so good to have you. Thank you so much. You can repeat your name. Please do so.
Thank you very much. My name is Tabo Lehaye. It's a Tswana name from Botswana. I don't know what the Lehaye means, but I know what Tabo means. Tabo means harvest. When you plant and plow in the field, what you get at the end, what you harvest, it is Tobo. Thank you very much.
From the government of the Netherlands, Miss Natalie, I am humble enough to ask for your assistance with your last name? Please help.
So yes, it is, Natalie, you pronounced it well, and it's olieslager, which is a profession of actually pounding oil out of seeds.
You're very welcome. And then also we have Mr. Thomas Djurhus from the World Bank. Thomas, it's really good to have you here. Would you tell us your full title, and if you can, what your last name means now that we're actually doing name checks?
Okay, very happy to be here today. My name is Thomas Djurhus, and I'm heading the partnership team in the FCV group, FCV, Fragility, Conflict and Violence Group of the World Bank. Nice to be here.
Good to have you. Thomas, will you get us started with that brief thought? We're going to get perspectives from all of the speakers about the role of the UN in assisting hosting countries who are hosting refugees. Such an important area to really unpack. Please start.
Thank you, and thanks for again to be here today. We're very supportive of the UN Common Pledge 2.0, underscoring our joint efforts towards global cooperation and sustainable development. The role of the UN in supporting host countries, particularly in FCV for fragile settings, is critical also to the World Bank. Without the UN, the World Bank could not be present in many of these countries. The only way we can remain engaged in conflict-affected situations is with the UN. And our partnerships with the UN actually continue to serve delivery of people and refugees in many countries in FCV settings, including Yemen, South Sudan, and Afghanistan. And I want to particularly highlight our cooperation with UNHCR. We have a unique cooperation with UNHCR, and it's pivotal in managing global displacement crisis situations around the world. We aim to integrate refugees into hosting communities and facilitate crucial policy reforms in favor of refugees. This effort not only helps the refugees, of course, but it also helps the economies of the host countries. And it also empowers the World Bank actually to play a critical role when it comes to financing. Financial resources from the World Bank has doubled, tripled over the last 10, 15 years for refugees and hosting communities in low and middle income countries. For example, in Uganda, our efforts support the country's progressive refugee policies. This collaboration helps integrate refugee responses into Uganda's national development plans, focusing on the long term and promoting resilience in refugee hosting areas. I also want to just highlight our very close cooperation with UNHCR on our joint data center in Copenhagen. What you might know is that forced displacement remains one of the most data poor of all global challenges. Since 2019, we have established the JDC that helps to increase reliable data and evidence on the socioeconomic situations of people displaced and their hosting communities. And in turn has helped client countries make informed decisions and supporting necessary policy reforms for inclusion. We talked about inclusion earlier today of refugees in national systems. So this is absolutely key. So in closing, just to say, without the UN, again, the World Bank would not be where it is when it comes to forcefully displaced people around the world. We're working very closely with the UN. We're also working with other partners in making the World Bank's implementation programs in FCV settings, fragility, conflict, and violence settings effective. Thank you.
Ms. Natalie.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, let me actually reiterate how grateful and how thankful we are for all those hosting refugees, because I think we're definitely recognizing that not often enough, and especially all the host communities, because these really are the people that open their hearts and their homes, as Filippo Grandi said so well this morning. But then again, where would we be without the UN? Yes, the UN has its unique proposition and its unique value. And I want to explain that by giving you 5 C's. The C for capacity, the technical and operational capacity to support host governments. This, of course, is the UN system. Also, the UN system is actually, they are the keepers of our common commitments. So my second C is common commitment. And they keep us sharp on our commitments to international refugee law. My third C would be a clear mandate and compliance structures. And this means that the UN is able to reach people in need everywhere, also in countries under sanctions. My other two C's are about what can we do better, because we could be, cooperative and critical. What can we do better? I think we can still actually have a closer cooperation with host countries. As was mentioned in the first panel, parallel structures are not going to do it. We need to really integrate refugees in the national systems, give them a voice, and put the refugees at the heart of our thinking and our policies, and give them a seat at the table. I really love that acronym as well, a seat at the table, our seat at the table. And my fifth C would be complementarity. And this is something that we've been trying to finance as from the Netherlands. It's a partnership which is called Prospects, and it actually brings together 5 different agencies: UNHCR, ILO, UNICEF, IFC, and the World Bank. And what we really tried is to make them program together for what is needed, not only for the refugees, but also for the host communities. Because if you don't develop a region together, if you don't bring work or education for all of them, you're going to get new tensions. You would have to need really to work with in an integrated way. So a little bit proud of what we can do ourselves from the small country, the Netherlands, but we're actually doing a second phase of this big program, and we're adding it up to 800 million in for the next 4 years. And yeah, I hope that as in this program, people learn to speak each other's languages, because that was the biggest challenge when you put these big organizations to work together. You think you're all talking about refugees, but actually you have different ways of voicing. And I think now that we learn how to speak each other's language, we should learn, as was so rightfully said, we should learn to speak the language of the refugees, give them a seat at the table, but definitely don't forget the indigenous and the host communities. So this is, I think, what it's all about.
Ms. Tobel.
Oh, okay. I was waiting for my question. Thank you very much.
Let me reiterate it. Okay. How does or what can the UN's role, how can it be improved? What is the role of the UN with host countries? And you are from a host country.
Yes.
So I'm really intrigued as to what you would say your needs are to the United Nations.
Thank you very much for the question, and good afternoon. I'm from the Republic of Botswana. Botswana is in Southern Africa. And the role of the UN in Botswana actually has been felt over the years in our country. And even right now, the UN team in Botswana is led by a very capable gentleman, Mr. Zia Chaudhry. And we do get support from the UN in the areas of education, in the areas of health, in the areas of human rights, of course, also with refugees. We have a field office in Botswana. We used to have a full mission, but it has been scaled down on account of having successfully had voluntary repatriations and returns of refugees to their countries of origin. So the office has scaled down a bit. But the role is to partner with government, is to partner with us, for us to sit together to plan and have ways and means on how we could advance efforts towards addressing the plight of refugees. And I'm happy to announce that this year in October, there was a development forum led by the UNCT in Botswana where such discussions happened. And another UN agency being UNDP, they have developed an e-learning course on human rights and sustainable development goals where members of the public and all interested persons could just click in and learn on issues of human rights, including on issues affecting refugees. We do get technical and capacity support. As you mentioned, one of the Cs, we get capacity building programs from UNHCR on issues that include refugee status determination, where officers who sit in the Refugee Advisory Committee get to be trained and equipped on how to conduct an effective refugee status determination process. We do also have the other C on issues of commitment. My government is committed in coming up with plans and ways in which we can address the plight of refugees. One, on issues of protection, on issues of inclusion, on issues of empowerment, on issues to make sure that they do get to be integrated in our society. We also work with other UN agencies like IOM, where they are assisting on issues of human trafficking, because you would agree with me that often the cases you would get some people being trafficked under the guise of asylum seeking, or even asylum seekers and refugees who do not have identity cards may be at the risk of being trafficked. So what the government is committing to do as one of the commitments and pledges that you are putting in for this year is to issue all asylum seekers and refugees with identity cards in Botswana. And also the other support that we have in relation to the identity documents is also we are committing to taking up the UNHCR system for data management so that everybody can be accounted for and protection would go to those who are eligible to be protected. In conclusion, ma'am, we do appreciate what the UN country team is doing in Botswana in so many different ways that we benefit with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So interesting. We asked what is the role in supporting host countries, and you responded with mainly what the host country was doing to support refugees. So you are sharing that, let me just think, what would be the best word? Sharing the responsibility. Mr. Abdinasser, thank you for your patience. I suspect you will have the best remarks in this entire panel because of your experience.
Yes, I do.
And confidence and not intimidated. Fantastic. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I'm Abdinasser Hassan, originally from Somalia. Thank you very much again for the very great opportunity that you have given to me to be answering this question. So as a someone who is deeply immersed in the field as a refugee expert, I bring forth insights gathered from a practical experience, shedding light on the role played by the UN supporting in hosting countries across various domains, extending from immediate humanitarian assistance to cultivation of sustainable long-term solutions. In terms of crisis, be it natural disaster or conflicts, UN swiftly mobilized through specialized agents like UNICEF, WFP, in supporting or delivering medical aids, essential supplies. This is not only alleviates the suffering, but also lays the foundation for stability. However, the UN's impact goes beyond the crisis response. Agencies like UNDP supports or works collaboratively with the hosting nations, assisting in the creation of sustainable development plans, fostering governance structures, and enhancing institutional capacities. And recently, UN supports governance addressing climate issues, where host countries are feeling the strains the UN excels in capacity building. This involves training local officials, improving infrastructure, and developing strategies for the seamless integration of refugees into the host community. The UN also fosters and learning and building for evidence-based. It enables the local stakeholders to learn from successful practice implemented in similar regions facing a comparable challenge. This is not only strengthens the host country's institution, but also facilitates the cross-border collaboration and sharing of innovative solutions. In essence, the UN is committed to empowering the host countries with the skills and the resources necessary for the sustainable management of refugee populations. And that is what this pledge is all about. Thank you very much. I am the voice for the voiceless because I have been refugee for so many years, and until now I'm a refugee and I'm representing the refugee people. Thank you very much.
Panel number 2, I have a question for each of you. Your question will be answered speedily so that we can then pass it along to your co-panelists and we can all get this in 5 minutes. Mr. Johas mentioned supporting refugee hosting areas in Uganda. The bank has a long history of working in urban areas. How does the bank tailor its support to refugee hosting towns and cities?
So thank you very much for that question. So we have different financial instruments that we use together with the UN and through the UN as well. We have a window for hosting communities and refugees that helps to expand access to infrastructure, to services, health, education, water, sanitation, roads. This is in the order of $3 billion over a 3-year period. And this is being renewed as part of our IDA commitments as we go into the next cycle for IDA. That's for low-income countries. Now, for middle-income countries, we have, together with the Dutch as well, the Global Concessional Finance Facility, which has so far provided financing of $4 billion over the last 4 or 5 years to countries like Jordan, Moldova, also Colombia. And also from the IFC side, from the private sector side, we are providing financing to forcefully displaced people when it comes to financial inclusion, entrepreneurship, capacity building. We mentioned capacity building before as well, and economic development. So we have different instruments, financial instruments, besides the Prospect Partnership, which is very important to us as well.
Miss Natalie, the world is spending so much money and energy managing crisis. Can we put more energy as well into preventing the refugee crisis? That is basically a global, why is the world so messed up right now?
Oh my God, in 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds.
Well, you know, I was based here in Geneva for 5 years and I returned to my country a year ago. And I was so surprised because, you know, we are below sea level. And the only way we survive is by preventing ourselves to flood. So it's so logical to prevent, right? It always costs less if you invest in prevention than when you need to fix a crisis and you have all that loss and damage. So it's such a story that everybody understands. And I don't know why we're not doing it, but you're so right. We really have to try and reduce the risk of disasters. Really have to try to build peace, of course. We really have to try to include instead of exclude. But unfortunately, it's a little bit easier said than done. And it really, really means that we have to reach out and talk to each other.
Ms. Darbo, again, a 30-second response to a very deep question. My apologies. What is important, local people integrating refugees or the policies that support inclusion? And what should the UN prioritize?
I guess both. I guess both because it's important for systems to work in any place or state or government for all to attain the set objectives. It's important for communities to include refugees in their community plans, to integrate and to live with them in harmony. And this can only happen if policies are in place by government to enhance that, to support that, and even when there's budget and finances that are put aside to finance the plans. So that's why I say it's both for me. Thank you very much.
That is the only answer, really, isn't it? It has to be both. All right, Mr. Abdel-Nasser, I have the perfect question for you, and you have the perfect 30-second answer, please. The UN can only deliver through working with civil society. The main implementers of programs on the ground and closest to communities, how can they understand that they've got to work with civil society or that it's advisable? Or organizations like the UN, the World Bank, donors, the importance of civil society. How do you make that understandable by these big organizations?
Thank you very much again for the opportunity. As a refugee expert, I believe that we can help refugee people by integrating into the host community, by teaching the language. So to cut one of the barriers, that is one thing. The second thing is for refugee integration, we need also to invite the refugee experts, to invite them the problem solving table, and to be part of the solution so that we can foster the integration of the refugee and host community. And also the integration of refugee with the host community will improve the economy of the country as well. Yeah, that's my answer. Thanks.
From the front row, I'm hearing, yes, absolutely. Which is basically saying thank you so much to panel number 2 for your insights and your thoughts about how can the UN support host countries. We thank you so much. Stay seated, because otherwise that will take extra seconds. And Dominic Hyde, who is our MC, will be mad with me. Dominic Hyde, let me hand it back to you and say thank you, panel number 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Femi, and thank you to this panel. Thank you to the great panel we had before. For everybody who's watching from home or from your office and everybody here, I'd say let's do another round of applause for everybody. So we'd like to end where we started, which is basically hearing from 2 of our UN partners who are part of the 33 UN entities who have joined the Common Pledge. So I'd like to invite 2 of our sister agencies, ILO and UNICEF, who will deliver our closing remarks in tandem. I'm not sure how you do that exactly at the same time, but I'm sure you'll figure it out as ILO and UNICEF. And I'm very delighted to introduce Ted Chaiban, Deputy Executive Director at UNICEF, and Ms. Manuela Tomei, Assistant Director General for Governance, Rights and Dialogue at ILO. And I hope you figured out how you're supposed to do it together. If not, Katie in 2 seconds can tell us how that's supposed to happen. One after the other? Dart. Okay. So, and then you can hand over back to Manuela. Thank you. Hi, Ted.
Hi, everyone, and we'll do this in tandem as quickly as possible. Look, in the 4 years since we had the last Global Refugee Forum, over 2 million children were born, and a record 16 million refugee children are with us today. These children are uniquely vulnerable, but this Global Refugee Forum is an opportunity to give them new hope, as is the UN Common Pledge to which we're all committed to. If there's one thing that we learned in the last 4 years, and I have to say, especially during COVID-19 pandemic I was intimately involved with, is that inclusion pays and exclusion costs. And when refugee families, when refugee children, when host communities have access to quality healthcare, to routine immunization, to early childhood development, to quality education, and to social protection, we all benefit. Everyone benefits. That inclusion, which I think as a UN family we're all committed to, needs to start at birth and start with the earliest stage of a child life and then continue through its whole life cycle. It's not a one-off. It's something that needs to be sustained. And that's why us as a system coming together is so important. At the last GRF, different UN family members committed to come together and join forces to leverage our comparative advantages to support 2.2 million refugee children in 10 countries. And where we have done this, the results have been phenomenal, including with support from Prospects, the World Bank, and many of the other partners in the room. In countries where governments have embraced progressive, inclusive policies, we have seen an increase of more than 100,000 refugee children enrolled in education. In countries like Indonesia or Jordan, which included refugees in their COVID-19 vaccination programs, everyone was safe. And in countries like Ecuador and Honduras, where they've included refugee children in their child protection systems, those children have benefited, but so have the communities in which they live. So what we are committed to do, I think, as a UN family, is to build on these examples, to build on these gains, so that especially in fiscally and financially constrained times, we can be effective in supporting all children, refugees, displaced, and host communities. And it takes, I think, our considered effort to move the needle on refugee inclusion. It requires all of our hands on deck. And that's why this panel is so important. That's why the UN Common Pledge matters. And that's why our shared commitment to protect the gains of the last 4 years and accelerate the strategic shifts that we've made towards inclusion and strengthen service provision to the benefit of all children must be sustained. Please count on UNICEF as part of this UN pledge. I know I can speak for all my sister agencies to do the same. And with that, I hand it over to Aiello. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. It's quite difficult to deliver concluding remarks after such inspiring and inspirational panels. Seeing the UN family united by a common determination to really accelerate refugee inclusion, I think is a testament to the success of the second edition of the Global Refugee Forum, moving away from siloed approaches to more coherent action is essential, as Ted was saying, if we want to make really a sustained change for the better in the lives of displaced and host communities. Inclusion is not a one-off activity. We have heard that throughout this 1.5 hours spent together, but is a multifaceted and holistic process throughout a lifetime. With over 43 million children living in forced displacement, inclusion needs to start from early childhood and continue in their transition from education to employment. These children have big dreams and hopes, and it's up to us to ensure that tomorrow they will have access to jobs that are decent and that will help them make these dreams true. But access to decent work is equally critical also for the older members of the family. If we do not want them to resort to child labor or to fall prey of debt bondage or human trafficking in order to make ends meet. Too often, refugees are disproportionately represented in jobs that do not make full use of the skills, in jobs that are poorly paid, insecure, without social protection and rights at work. Too often, refugees are discriminated in employment and beyond. Refugee women face additional barriers because of their gender. And while they also shoulder a disproportionate share of unpaid care work. And the needs of refugees with disabilities, as we heard earlier on, are also often overlooked in livelihood policies and interventions. And many young refugees lack access to education and vocational training, which again affects their employability and their future prospects. So the UN Common Pledge represents the shift that we need to tackle all these challenges effectively. And as we have heard, over half of the commitments made by the 50 UN country teams and 33 UN agencies at the global level highlight the importance of advancing the self-reliance of refugees, other forcibly displaced and stateless people, as well as the host communities. To this end, their inclusion into national systems, including those that facilitate economic inclusion and social protection, is key. The ILO will continue to be a champion for social justice and an inclusive world of work. And on behalf of the UN family, we urge you to also commit to a future of inclusion and meaningful participation for all refugees. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, the panel seems to be wanting to get up, so I think we're getting close to saying thank you. Thank you so much, Ted. Thank you, Manuela, for speaking and for joining our elite panel members. Thank you to all of our very brave speakers today and all of our panelists as well. I think who I really want to thank is the colleagues who put all of this together. So a big round of applause for our OCHA colleagues, our DCO colleagues, our UNHCR colleagues, and all of the 50 country teams and their governments for making this happen. See you in 4 years to hear what they've been able to accomplish. Thank you. Oh, please, 1 second, everybody. I have to ask you, because there's another panel that's taking place. Can you please take the doors behind me? I'm sounding like a flight attendant. There are doors behind me, and don't go out that way. Please go that way. Yes, my next career. Thank you.